رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين المنتخبين الميامين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد يكون الله في كتابه الكريم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ادعوا إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, for the protection of the believers, and for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, Sallu ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Hisham ibn al-Hakam al-Kindi has been recognized as one of the greatest companions of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. An individual who was a close confidant of the 6th and the 7th Imam, as well as an individual who was revered by the 8th Imam of Ali Muhammad. He was a figure who is seen as being from amongst their khawas, from being inside the inner circle of Ahlul Bayt. And an individual with many an attribute. For example, it is famous about Hisham, the intellect of Hisham was something which was at a level which others they didn't compare to. Even sharper than the intellect of Hisham was the tongue of Hisham. That the own enemy of Hisham, Harun al-Rashid, would state that the tongue of Hisham is sharper than 1,000 swords. And you know the famous scholar Sayyid Muhsin al-Amuli, when he would speak about Hisham ibn al-Hakam and this companion, he would say that this one line is enough to show the wit and the sharpness of the tongue of Hisham. You know, one day they said to Hisham ibn al-Hakam, that was Muawiyah fighting on the day of Badr. Of course, their purpose was to show that Muawiyah was from amongst the supporters of Rasulullah. Hisham ibn al-Hakam, he replies in a way only he could reply. He said, yes, Muawiyah was fighting on the day of Badr, but he was fighting against Rasulullah. So you begin to see that this is an individual with a great status, an individual with a great ability. But you find there is a great lesson that we can derive from the life of Hisham. Because Hisham was an individual who was put in the limelight at a very young age. That the narrations they state that the beard of Hisham had not even grown out. He was within his teenage years. That he walks up towards Imam as-Sadiq salamullahi alayhi. When he walks up towards the Imam stands up for Hisham out of respect. That the discussion of the biography of Hisham ibn al-Hakam From the first level, it goes to show the position of the youth within the community. That an individual within his teenage years, the imam is standing up for him out of respect. But at the second level, that when you look at society today, you find this is the era of academics. This is the era of intellectual discussion. This is that era where you exchange thoughts, and through the exchanging of thoughts, you find a message, it begins to be spread within the world. You find Hisham ibn al-Hakam from amongst the companions of the Imam. This Hisham was famous for being a theologian and a polemicist. A polemicist is one who engages in religious discussions. And what would Hisham discuss about? Hisham, he would discuss about the realities of Islam. He would discuss about Tawheed, and he would discuss about Imamat and Wilayat. That when you look amongst the historians write that the first companion of Ahlul Bayt within that time period to openly discuss and debate about Imamat and Wilayat was Hisham ibn al-Hakam. Because you find in the time period of the 6th and the 5th Imam, new schools of thought, they began to arise within that time period. For example, you had groups such as the Mu'tazila with their theological views. You had groups such as the Asharites with their theological views. You had groups such as the Kaysaniya who took Muhammad al-Hanafiya as the Imam. But within this time period, when people were discussing the realities and the fundamentals of faith, you find Hisham ibn al-Hakam was the first from amongst the companions to openly debate and defend the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And this is why you find there are attacks made against Hisham from outside the school of Ahlul Bayt. You know, there was a scholar by the name of Ibn Hajar al-Makki. Ibn Hajar al-Makki was not a Shia scholar. He wrote a book called Sawa'iq al-Muhrika. In Sawa'iq al-Muhrika, he writes against the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. When he writes against the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, in Sawa'iq al-Muhrika, Ibn Hajar al-Makki, he says what? He says that Hisham is the source of the heresy of the Shia. That Hisham would take his information from an atheist by the name of Abu Shakir, and then he would ascribe those thoughts to the Shia and the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Now, of course, we know this information is incorrect. But at the second level, when this individual who's speaking out against the school of Ahlul Bayt, he is recognizing the contributions of Hisham towards the school of Ahlul Bayt. But there is another reality with Hisham before I get in towards his biography, which we need to understand. The second reality, it is in relations towards the hadith about Hisham. There are certain ahadith within our works that they don't portray Hisham as a favorable and a positive person. Now, to understand these hadith, when you go towards the scholars of Rijal, whether it was the ancient scholars or whether it was individuals who are more recent such as Ayatullah al-Khu'i, Ayatullah al-Khu'i and other scholars such as Sayyid al-Murtada, who is the brother of Sayyid al-Radi, who compiled Nahjul Balagha, they would say either number one, these narrations are weak, or number two, they would say that these narrations were said out of taqiyya and dissimulation of faith to protect the life of Hisham. You know, Sayyid Muhsin al-Amili was a famous scholar from Lebanon. He would state what? He would state in the story of Musa and Khidr. You know the story of Musa and Khidr. Musa had the knowledge of the laws. Musa was a master of the laws, whereas Khidr was the master of the metaphysical realities. You know, the hadith of Imam al-Sadiq, it states that if Musa was in front of me and Khidr was in front of me, I would be teaching both Musa and Khidr. For Musa is the laws, Khidr is the metaphysics. But when you want the laws and the metaphysics, when you want the complete package, you come to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So you see within the story of Musa and Khidr, a point comes where Khidr, he pokes a hole within the boat that belonged to a poor individual. Musa, he did not understand this. Later, Khidr, he said that the king of the time was seizing all of those boats which didn't have any defects. I put this hole within the boat so it is defected, so that they don't take the boat. He says in the same way, these narrations would speak negatively of Hisham, They speak negatively and portray a defect within him to save the life of Hisham. And this is the reality of Hisham ibn al-Hakam. And this discussion about Hisham will take place in a number of stages. Number one, what is the position of the youth in Islamic thought? And what attributes did Hisham have that led him to gain such a position with Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? Number two, what were some of the debates of Hisham ibn al-Hakam, and what do they go to show about Hisham and the status of Hisham? And at the third level, what was that debate which led to the end of Hisham ibn al-Hakam? So we begin to understand the biography of this companion whom people, they don't know much about Hisham ibn al-Hakam. But the reality of these companions such as Abu Basir, companions such as Zurara bin A'yun, companions such as Muhammad bin Muslim. These companions were praised by Ahlul Bayt to such an extent that, for example, about Zurara bin A'yun, Imam as-Sadiq says that if it was not for Zurara, I would be in doubt about whether the hadith of my father would survive. That these individuals who sacrifice to carry out the traditions of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, that they were the ulama within that time period. And what is the position of the ulama from the ummah of Rasulullah? You know, Rasulullah has a hadith where he says, the scholars from my ummah are like the prophets of Banu Israel. That the scholars of my ummah are like the prophets of Banu Israel. You know, one day, Muqaddas al-Arbili, within his dream, he sees Nabi Musa and Rasulullah speaking to each other. Nabi Musa says to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, I don't understand. Why do you make this statement that the scholars from your ummah are like the prophets of Banu Israel? Rasulullah says, go talk to that person. He is a scholar from my ummah, meaning Muqaddas al-Arbili. When Nabi Musa, he goes to Muqaddas al-Arbili, he says to Muqaddas al-Arbili, what is your name? Muqaddas al-Arbili replies by saying, my name is Muqaddas. I'm from the town of Arbil, but I used to live in Kufa, and this is my job, and I live upon this street. Nabi Musa says, stop. All I asked you was, what is your name? You gave me a 5-10 minute discussion. Muqaddas al-Arbili, he says, oh Nabi Musa, within the Quran in Surah Taha, when Allah spoke to you and he said, وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا Musa, what is in your right hand, O Musa? And the Quran says, قَالَ هِيَ عَصَايَ, that this is my staff, and with it I bring down the leaves, and with that I feed my sheep, and I have many other uses for it. He says, oh Nabi Musa, all Allah asked you was, what is in your right hand? Why did you give such a long reply? Nabi Musa, he says, it's because I was speaking to Allah for the first time. Muqaddas al-Arbili says, my answer is because I was speaking to the Prophet of Allah for the first time. Nabi Musa, he turns to Rasulullah. He says, Ya Rasulullah, you were right when you said that the scholars of your ummah are like the prophets of Banu Israel. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala And this is that reality. And you find from amongst those scholars, you have Hisham ibn al-Hakam. You find Hisham ibn al-Hakam al-Kindi, that this was an individual. As I mentioned, he was within his youth. He was at a very young age. And this starts the discussion that when it comes to contributing towards the community, when it comes to impacting the world, it is not your age which is a criteria, but it is rather your abilities which is the barometer. That, you know, the same argument they made against Amir al-Mu'mineen. They said Ali could not be the leader. Why? Because Ali was too young. But if they looked at the abilities of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they would realize it. In the same way, when it comes towards this age and this time period of youth, this is when that time period when the faculties of an individual, they are at their sharpest. You know, they give us two ages, the narrations. They say the age of 33. At the age of 33, you find that is when you're clicking the sharpest. That's when the faculties are the sharpest. It's at the age of 33 that the day of Ghadir happened for Amir al-Mu'mineen. It was at the age of 33 when Isa ascended towards the heavens. But then the second age they give is the age of 40. You know, after the age of 40, it's stated that sins, they aren't forgiven in the same way after 40. And Sayyid Mahdi Bar al-Ulum, the famous scholar, he would quote a tradition saying that after the age of 40, get your walking stick and prepare for the hereafter. But you find that when you are at this age, your faculties, they're at their sharpest, and this time is that time to maximize. And that's what Hisham ibn al-Hakam, he showed. From one level, Hisham ibn al-Hakam, he provided for his family, that he had an economic job, that Hisham was a salesman. You know, one day, Imam Musa al-Kadhim, salamullahi alayhi, he's walking by Hisham. He sees Hisham. He used to get cloth from Persia. It would be an area called Sabur in Persia. And he would get this cloth that when you look at this cloth in the shade, you can't make out the linings of the cloth and the quality of the cloth. So he was selling this cloth by the shade. Imam Musa al-Kadhim, he sees Hisham is doing this. He says, "Oh Hisham, selling something in the shade is equivalent to cheating, and cheating is not permissible in Islam, oh Hisham." Hisham, at that moment, he realized that this was not a fair business doing. Although he wasn't doing it on purpose, it was out of neglect. But what this incident and narration goes to show, that number one, Hisham had a background where he was trying to provide from himself. But at the second level, you find Hisham would take from the university of Imam as-Sadiq. You know, the university of Imam as-Sadiq is like no other university. And I tell you, go to any university website. When you go to any university website, go to one department. Take political science, for example. When you look at the list of professors in the political science department, you'll see that there are a number of names. You say to them that why can't one person just be within the department? They'll say that there are different specializations. One person will be an expert in immigration law. One person will be an expert in domestic law. One person will be an expert in corporate law. But I say, look at the University of Imam as-Sadiq, that there would be one man upon the mimbar. 4,000 individuals would sit in front of the Imam. The Imam would teach every subject, from jurisprudence to mathematics to physics to morality to philosophy to theology, and all of them they would gain from the Imam. And you find Hisham ibn al-Hakam was a student of this university of the Imam. You see, Hisham within his youth. The youth is a time period that a person is easily influenced. That's why Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says to his son Imam al-Hassan, and other narrations they say it's for Muhammad al-Hanafiya. But regardless, sometimes when you say something, you're speaking to a person, but the message is for somebody else. That when you get angry at somebody, you're not supposed to be angry at them. You can't say it towards them directly. But you'll say it to somebody else so the other person can hear it. If it's for Imam al-Hassan is ma'soom. But that letter, that message is for those who read that letter afterwards. You find Amir al-Mu'mineen says to Imam al-Hassan that the heart of a youth is like an uncultivated piece of land. Whatever is thrown upon it, it accepts. This is why it's very impressionable at that age. And Allama Shaheed Murtaza al-Mutahiri, he would write that this age is the age of doubt, that you are conflicted at times about your path, where you want to go, what your beliefs are. But he says doubt isn't a negative thing. That doubt is not a negative thing as long as it's a transition point. But the moment doubt becomes the end point, then it becomes a negative thing. For before doubt, before certainty, you have doubt. But when that doubt, it turns into certainty. Because after all, we're not like Amir al-Mu'mineen who could say, "Lo kushifa al-ghita ma azdadtu yaqina." That if the veils are removed from my eyes, it wouldn't increase my certainty. For I'm at that maximum level of certainty. But this is what you find Hisham. Hisham was not always a follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Hisham, he would study under a Mu'tazila scholar until one day the uncle of Hisham introduces him to Imam as-Sadiq. Now before Hisham enters the house, the uncle of Hisham says to Imam as-Sadiq that be careful of my nephew, he has a very sharp tongue. Imam as-Sadiq, he looks at the man. He says to him that do you not have confidence and belief within our abilities? Then he says, if you do, why are you worrying? You find Imam as-Sadiq, he calls Hisham in. Hisham, he comes in, they discuss with each other. The Imam, he answers some questions for Hisham. He says, come back another day. Hisham, he comes the second day. Same thing happens. They discuss with each other. He answers some questions for Hisham. He says, come back a third day. After the third day, Hisham ibn al-Hakam leaves. When he's leaving, the Imam says, oh Hisham, tomorrow you'll see me in an area called Hira. Meet me over there. When Hisham ibn al-Hakam, he sees Imam al-Sadiq in this area called Hira, he looks at the Imam and the grandeur on the face of the Imam. When he sees that, he says, there is no path except for the path of this man. And the historians, they state that in those 3 meetings with Imam al-Sadiq, the Imam, he answered 500 questions for Hisham ibn al-Hakam. That this goes to show how inquisitive of an individual he was. That he would ask the Imam questions, the Imam, he would reply towards the questions. See, these are individuals that we can learn from. That when we have figures in history, they remain in history unless you take them from the history and you apply them to contemporary society. Even when you look at the Imams, you know, many people, I look at the hall, there are many people between the ages of 8 and 25 within this hall. You know, we have an Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad, his entire imamat was spent within his youth. That Imam al-Jawad, he becomes Imam at the age of 8. He gets poisoned at the age of 25. He doesn't come out of this period of adolescence. But you find this Imam at this age, he would show his ilm. That within that time period, when Al-Ma'mun would be there, Imam al-Jawad, he would begin answering questions at the time of Fajr. Then he would go until the midday time. He would take a break. Then he would answer questions until the Maghrib time. You know, they said to Imam Muhammad al-Jawad, oh Imam Muhammad al-Jawad, that you are answering questions like this. You are the grandson of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Why don't you make that open challenge? Saluni, saluni, qabla an tafqiduni. Imam al-Jawad replies by saying, those words saluni, only my grandfather can say those words saluni. But what I will do is I'll answer any question that you pose before me. And this is why that day came. You know, Ma'mun, after he poisoned Imam al-Rida, Ma'mun, he didn't have any peace within his heart. He had anxiety. And there's a whole long theological discussion that the killer of a prophet or the wasi of a prophet, Jannat becomes haram upon him. That's why when you look at many of the killers, on the day of Ashura, you find that they didn't have peace and they had difficulties afterwards. Yazid, the famous story is there that he goes hunting, he doesn't come back. Why would he go hunting? He would go hunting because he didn't have peace. In the same way, Ma'mun would go hunting as well. When he goes hunting, the hawk of Ma'mun, it comes back with a fish in its beak. Ma'mun, he's thinking, there's no water, there's no lake, there's no river. Where does this hawk get the fish from? On the way, he sees Imam Muhammad al-Jawad. When Imam Muhammad al-Jawad was standing in the street, and all of the guards and the horses and the entire pomp of Ma'mun was coming, all of the other children ran away except for Imam al-Jawad. Ma'mun, he looks at him. He comes to Imam al-Jawad. He says to him, oh young man, why didn't you run away? He says, number 1, I didn't do anything wrong for me to run away. And number 2, the street is wide enough for you to go around me. Number 3, I am from the lineage of Rasulullah. I know you wouldn't harm anyone from that lineage unless you are of that type as well. He's trying to remind Ma'mun that you poisoned my father. He says, what is your name? He says, my name is Muhammad al-Jawad. He says, very well, Muhammad al-Jawad, you're from the lineage of Rasulullah. I have one question for you. Why don't you tell me what's in my hand? He puts that fish, he says, what is in my hand? Imam Muhammad al-Jawad, he looks at Ma'mun. He says to Ma'mun, when the kings, they go hunting, they send their hawks. When they send their hawks, they go past the bodies of water. As they're going past the bodies of water, there are fish which come out of the water and go into the water and come out of the water and go into the water. When that fish comes out of the water, the hawk, it snatches the fish. It brings the fish back towards the Khalifa. The Khalifa puts the fish within his hand. Then he asks the lineage of Rasulullah, what is within his hand? that this is that Imam within his youth. This is the reality of the Imam. And you find there are companions like Hisham who spent their time period within their youth as well. That who is this Hisham? You find Hisham ibn al-Hakam. He manifested the verse that said, invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and speak to them in that manner which is best. You find Hisham, when he would speak towards the people, when he would discuss, he would understand the person. It wouldn't just be blind emotional discussion. Because when your arguments aren't working, don't raise your voice, raise the level of your arguments. And that's what Hisham, he showed. You know, a man from Syria, he comes towards Imam as-Sadiq. When he comes towards Imam as-Sadiq, he says that I want to debate with you. The Imam says, very well. The Imam says to him that what are we going to discuss about? What will be the groundwork? Are we going to discuss from ourselves or from revelation? He replies by saying that we'll discuss from ourselves and revelation. The Imam Sadiq, he looks at him, he says to that individual, then are you a partner with Rasulullah as well, that your thinking comes past the thinking of revelation? The man says, no, I'm not a partner of Rasulullah. He says, does revelation come upon you? He says, no, revelation doesn't come upon me. The Imam, he says to his companion, Yunus bin Yaqub is narrating, he says, oh Yunus, this individual is conflicted about himself. Have him debate somebody else, and if he can defeat them, come towards me. Yunus, he goes out. He brings different companions of the Imam. When he brings these different companions of the Imam, one by one, they lose towards this individual from Syria. But at that moment, Hisham ibn al-Hakam, he walks in. When Hisham ibn al-Hakam walks in, Imam as-Sadiq says to the man from Syria, debate with Hisham. If you can defeat Hisham, then come towards me. Hisham ibn al-Hakam, he begins to look at that man. He speaks to the man. He says towards him, he says, did Allah create this world with a purpose, or did he create it in vain? He says, of course Allah created it with a purpose. Then Hisham says to him, if Allah created it with a purpose, then there must be a guide who can differentiate truth from falsehood, who can show what our responsibilities towards Allah are. The man says, I agree, there must be a guide. Then he says, who is this guide? The man replies by saying, Rasulullah is the guide. Hisham says, I agree with that. But what about after Rasulullah? He says, after Rasulullah, the Quran and the traditions are the guide. He says to him, Hisham looks at him, he says, okay, you say the Quran and the traditions are the guide. He says, what is the role of this guide? He says the role of the guide is to show what is the truth and to prevent disputes and distractions from coming into being. Hisham, he says to him, then are the Quran and the traditions enough to prevent disputes? He says, of course they are enough. He says, then why have you come all the way from Syria with a dispute towards me? The man, he's shocked at that point. Imam as-Sadiq, he looks at him. He says to him that, why are you like this? Why did you go quiet? He replied by saying, the reason I went quiet is that if I say there is no dispute, then I'm lying. But if I say that the Quran and the traditions are not enough, then I've already lost the argument. Imam as-Sadiq says, continue speaking towards Hisham. He says, oh Hisham, then why don't you tell me that who are the guides after Rasulullah? Hisham, he says, the purpose of these guides is to explain the traditions and the Quran, because the traditions and the Quran, they aren't always clear. Hisham, he raises his finger, he points it towards Imam as-Sadiq. He says, this is that ocean where people all over the world, they come to learn from this individual. This is that guide after Rasulullah. This is why the Imam, he would hold Hisham towards a very high status. You know, there were companions sitting with the Imam, giant companions whose names were amongst the highest of lists in terms of virtue. But the moment Hisham comes in, as I said, the Imam, he stands up for Hisham. Imagine the biggest scholar of our time period, whoever it is, a 16, 17-year-old young man coming up, he stands up out of respect for him. The companions, they say to each other that you're standing up for this youth. Who is this youth? Listen to the line of the Imam. The Imam, he says, Hada nasiruna biqalbihi wa lisanihi wa yaday. that this is our supporter with his heart and his tongue and his actions. This is why the Imam, he would make a dua for Hisham. You know, people, they say that they ascribe negative things towards Hisham. For example, one thing that they ascribed that Hisham believed in, which wasn't true, is that they said that Hisham believed in Tajseem. Tajseem, it means that Allah has a body. That they would say that Hisham believed that Allah was as tall as 7 individuals. That imagine 7 people, you stack them up. They would say that Hisham, he believes this. Now, a normal child wouldn't believe this, but an intellectual who's learning from the school of Ali Muhammad, they ascribe that towards him. The second false accusation against Hisham they made was that they said that Hisham believes that Allah did not have knowledge of a created thing before its creation. That before its creation, Allah did not have knowledge. Of course, this is incorrect. Hisham didn't believe it. The third false claim they made against Hisham, and this is a bit of an academic discussion, so bear with me before I come forward. You find that they said that Hisham, he believed in predestination. That everything was predestined. You know, we of course in the school of Ahlul Bayt, we don't say it's complete predestination, nor do we say it's complete free will. As the hadith of the 6th Imam says, La jabar, wa la tafweed. Amrun bainul amrain, we believe in a matter which is in between the two. You know, there is Bahlul, and we say Bahlul, but according to proper Arabic grammar, his name's pronounced Bahlul. So you find Bahlul, one day Abu Hanifa was there, he takes a brick, he throws it at the head of Abu Hanifa. At that point, they're chasing after Bahlul. When they're chasing after him, they apprehend him. They say, oh Bahlul, why did you do this? He replied by saying, I did this for number 1, that Abu Hanifa, he believes everything is predestined, that Allah controls everything. I didn't throw that brick. It was Allah who made me throw that brick. So you can't punish me for that action. That he's showing a deep theological understanding. Then he says the second thing, Abu Hanifa believes that shaitan won't experience any pain when he's thrown in the fire because he's created from fire. I took a piece of clay, I threw it at clay, and clay ended up getting hurt. Then he says the third thing is that Abu Hanifa, he doesn't believe that thing. He believes that Allah will be seen upon the day of judgment. That everything will be seen upon the day of judgment which isn't seen within this world. I threw something at Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa is in pain. Ask Abu Hanifa to show me pain at this moment. That you believe everything will be seen physically, ask him to show me pain. So you find that Hisham, these were the types of things they ascribed towards Hisham, although it wasn't logical for an intellectual to believe in them. And one of the proofs to show that Hisham, he didn't believe in these things was the du'as of the imams for Hisham. Because the dua of an imam is not like a regular supplication. The supplication of an imam for his companions, it shows the status of the companions. You know, the imam would say, "O Hisham, as long as you are supporting our cause, Allah will support you, O Hisham." That's why Hisham, he comes to Imam as-Sadiq. He says, "O Imam as-Sadiq, that sometimes I'm debating, I'm discussing with the people. As I'm debating and discussing with the people, some points, they come to my head which I didn't think of previously." The Imam says, "They're coming to your mind, but we are supporting you, O Hisham, because you are supporting our cause. When you go in the cause of Ahlul Bayt, they support that individual." And this is why time and time again, the Imam would show the status of his companions. You know, a man, he comes from Syria once again, because Syria at that time period, there was much confusion over there after the Umayyad rule about the position, about theology, the position of Ahlul Bayt. So you find he comes from Syria. He says to the Imam, "O Imam, I want to discuss with you about the marks within the Quran." That the fatah, the dhamma, the kasra, the sukoon. The Imam, he says, "Go speak to my companion by the name of Hamza bin A'yun." Then he comes towards the Imam. He says to him, "Oh man, now I want to discuss with you about Arabic grammar." He says, "Go to Aban bin Taghlib." Then he says, "I want to discuss with you about fiqh and jurisprudence." He says, "Go to Zurara bin A'yun." Then he says, "I want to debate with you about speculative theology." He says, "Go to Mu'min at-Taq." He says, after that, I want to debate with you about morality. He says, go to Hamza bin Tayyar. He says, I want to debate with you about Tawheed. He says, go to Hisham bin Salim. He says, I want to debate with you about wilayat in imamat. He says, go to Hisham ibn Hakam. You see, the Imam, number one, he was showing the status of his companions. But number two, he was teaching a lesson towards people that stick to that field where you are an expert within that field. Because not everyone is an expert in every single field. Problems, they begin to arise when people, they begin to speak about an area where they don't have knowledge of, but they're speaking so confidently about that area. Each person has his own specialties. Each person has his own area of expertise. And this is what the Imam, he shows about his companions. The man to Syria, from Syria, he says, you're trying to show me the position of your Shia. The Imam says, this is correct. This is who my Shia they are. The man, he ends up coming to the school of Ahlul Bayt after the companions, they answer him in all of these fields. Then the Imam says, oh Hisham, teach him the position and the fundamentals of the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. See this Hisham, time and time again. You see, within this narration, it goes to show that the expertise of Hisham was in defending wilayat and imamat. You know, there was a discussion going on in Basra. In Basra, there was a scholar by the name of Ibn Abi Ubaid. This scholar, when he would walk in Basra, all of the people of Basra, they would follow behind him because he was a great scholar. And then when he would sit in the mosque in Basra, the entire mosque would be full of people. They would ask him questions. You find Hisham, he goes in towards that gathering. When he goes in towards that gathering, he finds a spot next to the minbar. When he finds a spot next to the minbar, he says to the scholar, oh man, can I ask you a question? He says, very well. He says, do you have eyes? He looks at Hisham. He says, I am the top scholar of my time. You're going to ask me a foolish question like, do I have eyes? But since I said I'll answer every question, I'll answer this question, yes, I do have eyes. Hisham says, what do you do with those eyes? He says, I see figures, I see colors, I visualize with these eyes. Then Hisham says to him, do you have ears? He says, yes, I have ears. He says, what do you do with the ears? He says, I hear with the ears. He says, do you have a nose? He says, yes, I have a nose. He says, what do you do with the nose? He says, I smell fragrances with the nose. He says, do you have a tongue? He says, yes, I have a tongue. He says, what do you do with the tongue? He says, I taste different things. Then he says, do you have a qalb? And the proper translation we can say is, do you have intellect? He says, yes, I have intellect. He says, what do you do with this intellect? He says, with this intellect, I determine whether my other senses were correct or not, because the senses, they aren't always correct. This intellect of mine, it can establish what is true from what is false. Hisham ibn al-Hakam, he looks at that man. He says, Allah gave a center point for your body to determine what is true from what is false. Do you think that Allah would not have a center point for this universe, a leader, an imam, who can determine what is true from what is false? Because in this world, truth and falsehood, they aren't always easy to see. Sometimes they're mixed within each other. The man from that scholar, he looks at Hisham. He says, are you Hisham? Hisham says, I'm not Hisham. He says, where are you from? He says, I'm from Kufa. Then he says, you must be Hisham ibn al-Hakam. You see, everything about this discussion that Hisham is doing, it's systematic, it is logical, it is step by step. And that's that lesson what you get when you discuss with people. Be systematic, be logical, go step by step. And this is why eventually there came debates which led to the end of Hisham. Because Hisham, his popularity, it was growing, that the people, they began to know that there is this Hisham ibn al-Hakam, the student of Imam as-Sadiq, that when he debates with anyone, he defeats them in any type of discussion, until Harun al-Rashid, he calls Hisham towards the court. You know, there were two debates which happened within the court of Harun al-Rashid. There was one with the Khariji, and there is the other that ended up leading towards his demise. The one with the Khariji, you find a man from the Khawarij. The Khawarij were those individuals. They were with Amir al-Mu'mineen, but after the arbitration, They, Na'udhu Billah, said that Ali is an infidel because he agreed in the arbitration. Although they themselves forced the Imam into the arbitration, because the Imam, he was about to win the battle on the day of Siffin. Because Malik al-Ashtar, he had reached the tent of Muawiyah. But because of this arbitration and the Quran, they put upon the spear 4,000 of the Quran, you find the Imam was forced into it. So this man who was a Khawarij, he comes into the court of Harun al-Rashid to debate Hisham. Hisham, he looks at him. He says to him that, you know, when we debate, there may come a point that we don't know who is right or who is not. The debate, it can go on forever. The man says, that's true, this is correct. Hisham says, then at that point, we should have a judge. He says, okay, I agree. And you, Hisham, are an adil, a just individual. I choose you to pick the judge. Hisham says, there's only one problem. If I pick a judge who believes in what I believe, he may go be unfavorable towards you. And if I pick a judge who believes in what you believe, then he may be unfavorable towards me. And if I pick a judge who doesn't believe in any of what we believe, he might be unfavorable to the both of us. The man says, this is true, this is logical. Then Hisham says that why don't we pick one judge from my side and we pick one judge from your side? The man says, this is a logical discussion. Hisham, he looks at Harun al-Rashid, he says, the debate is finished. Harun al-Rashid, he says, right now you're only discussing the conditions. How are you saying the debate is finished? You find that Hisham, he replies by saying, this individual, he called Ali ibn Abi Talib an infidel because he agreed in an arbitration where one person was from his side and the other person was from the other side. This individual, when we were discussing the conditions of the debate, he accepted the exact same thing. Either he himself is an infidel for agreeing towards this, or his judgment is weak. And if his judgment is weak, we can't accept from him. And if he is an infidel for doing that exact same thing which he blames somebody else, then we can't accept from him either. That this is Hisham. But you know that debate of Hisham, which led to the end of Hisham, is they came towards Hisham. They say, oh Hisham, do you believe Ali is greater or the first Khalifa? You find Hisham, he says that I believe Ali is greater. The man, he gives the verse from the cave. The verse from the cave is that on the night of Hijrat, you find that Rasulullah was with the first caliph within the cave, and the verse, it came down that do not grieve, Allah is with us. They said to Hisham, oh Hisham, this is in the praise of the first, whereas you don't have anything to praise Ali. Hisham replies by saying that if Allah is praising him over there, Allah would not say, do not grieve in that situation. Then he says to him, this is from the Quran. But he says, if you want to go towards the hadith, then we'll accept the common hadith which are on our side and your side. When we go towards the common hadith, we have a hadith which says heaven waits for 4 people. On our side it says the first is Ali, the second is Ammar, the third is who? It is Miqdad. The fourth is Abu Dhar. You have a hadith which says the same thing, that heaven waits for 4 people. The first is Ali. The second is Abu Dardana. The third is Salman, and a 4th companion. The only commonality between your hadith and our hadith is Ali ibn Abi Talib. That's why if you want to unite the Muslim world after Rasulullah, the peak of unity within the Muslim world is Amir al-Mu'mineen. Our first Imam, their 4th Caliph, the leader of all of the Sufi orders. That if there is anyone who can take somebody back to the ways of Rasulullah, after Rasulullah, it's Ali ibn Abi Talib. And this is the reality of that Imam. And you find eventually, in the way when it comes to the companions of the Imam, when they would support the Imams, you find that one by one they would be finished off. Whether it's Hujr bin Adi, whether it's Amr bin Hamak al-Khuzai, whether it's Maytham al-Tammar, whether it is Mukhtar, whoever it may be, you find the same happens to Hisham. But if I say that how would they leave the companions when they never left the family of Rasulullah? And amongst the family of Rasulullah, amongst them who faced amongst the most musibah, that was Sayyida Zainab. Who is the Sayyida Zainab? You know, this one title is enough for you to cry. That if I just sat on this mimbar and I said that Zainab is Ummul Masa'ib, that Zainab is the mother of Musibah, this one line is enough for you to cry. You know, there was a scholar. After Fajr, he would have a majlis within his house. It was Ayatollah Mirza Shirazi. When he would have this majlis, he would sit on the ground and a reciter would sit on the mimbar. The reciter upon the mimbar, he said one line. He said, Dakhalat Zainab ila ibn Ziyad. That Zainab has entered the court of Ibn Ziyad. Ayatollah Shirazi says, stop the musibah, allow us to give the haqq towards this statement. It's stated that from Fajr until the time of Dhuhr, he sat there crying for the musibah of Sayyida Zainab. That what is the musibah of Zainab? You know the musibah of Zainab. You know when the mother of Zainab, Zahra, when Zahra went in towards that courtyard, when she stood in that courtyard for 2.5 hours, it stated that Zahra with her own power walked in towards the courtyard. But when Zahra was leaving, one of her arms was around Ayman, the other arm was around Fidda. The narration states that the feet of Zahra dragged across the ground. When Zahra, she returns towards the house, she begins to cry. When she begins to cry, she says, oh Zainab, I know what happens in a courtyard, oh Zainab. Oh Zainab, you will go into a courtyard. But you know the biggest musibah of Sayyida Zainab was for her brother Imam al-Hussein. That even when Zainab, the night before Ashura, when she would give her wasiyah towards On and Muhammad, she would say, oh On and Muhammad, I know you are the grandchildren of Haydar al-Karrar. I know you are the grandchildren of Jafar al-Tayyar. I know tomorrow when you fight, you're going to reach the Furat. But when you reach the Furat, don't drink from the Furat until Sakina and Ali Asghar. You find it was the day of Ashura. These two children, they're fighting on the day of Ashura. But how long would they fight for? 3 days they haven't had food or water. They fall upon the ground. From one side Hazrat Abbas comes. From the other side Imam al-Hussein comes. Those children, they say towards their uncles, oh our uncles, we have one final request. When you go back toward the tents, tell our mother that we reached the Furat. When we reached the Furat, we didn't drink from the Furat. We remembered our wasiyah to not drink unless the children. This is Sayyida Zainab. You know, Sayyida Zainab, she never cried for On and Muhammad. Even when they brought the bodies of On and Muhammad back towards the tent, you find on one side of her they placed the body of On. The other side they placed the body of Muhammad. Sayyida Zainab, she puts one hand on the body of On. She puts the other hand on the body of Muhammad. She says, Rabbana taqabbal minna hadha al-qurban. Oh Allah, accept this sacrifice from me. But in Karbala, Zainab, she doesn't cry for On and Muhammad. In Kufa, she doesn't cry for On and Muhammad. Each thought was for her brother Hussein. You know, when they entered that courtyard in Sham. You know, you've always heard that narration, that when they said to Imam al-Sajjad, what was the most difficult moment? The Imam, he said, Asham, Asham, Asham. You know, one alim, when he was explaining the statement of the Imam, he writes this line, that why did the Imam say Asham 3 times? He says the first Asham was for the marketplace of Sham. That marketplace where it only takes a few minutes to walk through. 2.5 hours. The daughter of Ali and Fatima Fatima. He says the second Ash-Sham was the courtyard of Sham. You know, within the courtyard of Sham, Yazid had a wife by the name of Hind. How she became the wife of Yazid, it's a long story, but she used to serve in the house of Ahlul Bayt. They say to Hind, "Oh Hind, there have been some captives who have been brought." Hind says, "Okay, I'll come." When Hind, she comes, she sits on the throne. Sayyidah Zainab's upon the ground. She says to the captives, "Oh captives, where are you from?" Sayyidah Zainab, she says, "Nahnu min bilad al-Madina." We are from the city of Medina. As soon as Hind, she hears Medina, she comes, she sits on the ground. She says, "I used to serve in a house in Medina." Sayyidah Zainab, she looks at Hind. She says, "Which house did you serve in?" She says, "I used to serve in the house of Ali and Fatima." "Do you know about that house?" Sayyidah Zainab says, "Who do you want to know about within this house?" She says, "I want to know about my master Hussein. I want to know about Zainab. I want to know about Kulthum." Sayyidah Zainab says, "Oh Hind, if you want to know about Hussein, that is the head of Hussein. If you want to know about Abbas, that is the head of Abbas. And oh Hind, if you want to know about Zainab, I am Zainab, oh Hind." The musibah of Sayyidah Zainab, Ummul Masahib Zainab. You know, Zainab, time and time again, as I said, she's Ummul Masahib because of the pain that she felt for her brother Hussein. You know, even in Sham, after they released the heads, each of the women, they would grab one of the heads. Layla grabbed the head of Akbar. Farwa grabbed the head of Qasim. Kulthum grabbed the head of Abbas. But there were two heads that no woman grabbed the head. One of the people in Syria, they said to Fidda, "Oh lady, is the mother of these children dead?" She says, "Their mother isn't dead. Their mother made a promise. She would only cry for her brother Hussein. It was the head of On and Muhammad. I've left the Masahib." When they returned towards Medina, the first thing Sayyidah Zainab does, she goes to the grave of Rasulullah. She says, "Ya Rasulullah, Hussein has been killed." But then she says something strange. She says, "Ya Rasulullah, if there weren't any non-mahram over here, I would show you these marks upon my arms." Then she goes towards her mother Fatima. She goes to the grave of Zahra. She puts the shirt of Hussein on the grave of Zahra. Then she returned towards her home. When Sayyidah Zainab, when she returns towards her home, she enters the home. Abdullah, he looks at Sayyidah Zainab. He says, "Oh Zaifa, oh old woman, who are you?" Zainab isn't here. Zainab, she says, "Oh Abdullah, recognize." Says, "Oh Abdullah, recognize Zainab." After that, Sayyidah Zainab, she places her hand upon her head. When she places her hand upon her head, the riwayat, it says, Abdullah, he begins to cry. When Abdullah begins to cry, Sayyidah Zainab, she says, "Oh Abdullah, are you crying for On and Muhammad?" Abdullah says, "I'm not crying for On and Muhammad. Oh Binte Rasul, just tell me one thing. Where are these marks? What are these marks? What are..." You find Sayyidah Zainab, that moment when she cries is when she goes to that room where On and Muhammad used to be. She sees the musalla upon the ground. She picks up the musalla. She says, "Oh On, oh Muhammad, forgive your mother Zainab. I promised my mother Fatima if I would cry, if I would cry, على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين." Raise your hands, raise your hands. I know you're tired. I know you had a long day yesterday. I know last night was a night of musibah, that you cried all night when you would listen to the Noha, when you listened to the majlis. I know you're crying here again. It's not easy to continuously cry. To continuously cry, it tires you out. To continuously cry, it dries your eyes. To continuously cry is what Sayyida Zainab did after Karbala. But this is when du'as, they're accepted. That we say, Ya Allah, wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in difficulty, give them help. Wherever they're facing any trial, whether it's material or physical or spiritual, help them. We pray for the opportunity and the strength to walk upon the path of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, and to receive the intercession of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We pray for the opportunity to go on the ziyarah of Ahlul Bayt, particularly the ziyarah in Karbala. And we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time. Which master is this? You know, if there is an imam in occultation today, that imam, he sends his salams upon Sayyida Zainab. Why? Because Sayyida Zainab is that person whose lineage was cut after Karbala. You know, I know many of you are the Sadat. There are people today to call Hussein father. But after Karbala, there was no one to call Zainab mother. You know, when a woman is barren, when she can't have children, every time she holds a child, it hits her within the heart. Now imagine that you had two children like On and Muhammad. After Karbala, those children aren't there. That's the pain of Sayyida Zainab. That's why one alim would say, whenever you pray for the dhuhur of the imam, ask through the right of the aunt of the imam, Sayyida Zainab, that Ya Allah, we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, Matam Hussein.